What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Variant the Podcast. Now, C2E2 just recently passed, and we got quite a bit of news to come out of it. Jim Lee addressed the whole DC Marvel merger thing. Donny Cates is talking about issue 7 of Thor when we're currently on issue 3. Lots of fun stuff to talk about, but let's kick it off with Jim Lee addressing Dan DiDio's departure and the Marvel DC merger rumors that we've been talking about on the channel for like the last 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and let's be honest, he was answering the question that we asked.
I mean,
we caused quite a stir on the internet over the past couple of weeks by posing with the reasoning that we cited, by posing the question is it possible that Marvel and DC could merge at some point in the future?
It's a very interesting discussion because, like we said, even in that episode, we said that was purely just speculation. It was our theory. We weren't saying it was going to happen. We're just like, could you imagine, with certain things happening here and there, we're like, maybe.
And maybe. And again, there's a lot of reasons why we were speculating that. There's a lot of pieces that you say, hey, these go together, and that's definitely possible, especially with a lot of the technological changes that are happening and the kind of the demographic shifts that we've seen over the years. We definitely sparked quite a conversation, and a lot of people were talking about it across sites and different YouTube channels and things like that. So it was kind of fun to see that conversation really spread. But it went all the way to C2E2 and Jim Lee's panel, where he was asked directly about it. That's
what I thought was the funniest thing. A fan asked him from the audience, is this a thing? And obviously, one would assume that fan, whether, it was from our video or another, website that reported it after the fact or whatever. I think that's really funny. It got all the way to Jim Lee. So much so that someone had to ask Jim Lee the question.
And Jim's like, doggone you, Variant.
So anyway, he addressed it at the DC Universe panel this weekend on C2 at C2E2. So I'm just gonna read you his quote verbatim from what he said at the panel. So I'm pulling this article from Newsarama. They have Jim Lee's quotes on here. So they said, speaking at his personal spotlight panel. Okay, so it wasn't the DC Universe panel.
It was his personal spotlight panel.
His personal spotlight panel. Lee told the audience, there's continually new things going on, and that he took on being the sole publisher now at DC Comics.
Right.
So that's out the gate. So everyone out the gate, we've already got an answer. Everyone was wondering, with Dan DiDio's departure from DC Publishing, who is going to take his spot? Well, it looks like Jim Lee flat out said he's sole publisher. He will just be taking over the role.
And I don't know about you, but I found that kind of surprising that he would address it like that.
Right.
Like DC hasn't said anything. Warner hasn't said anything. And he didn't even really directly said it. He kind of said it matter-of-factly within the context of another
for sure
of an answer. So it was kind of a weird way to address it, but he clearly is saying I am the acting publisher now.
It seems almost like on purpose, so that way people don't have to ask. So he just is like, I'm sole now that I'm sole publisher.
Right. I was co-publisher, the other one left, now I'm the sole publisher.
Exactly. So that's very interesting that he's now the chief creative officer and sole publisher.
Right.
Which I'm a massive Jim Lee fan. He's been, he's top 3 favorite artists of all time for me. So I'm all about that. I think, I'm curious to see now that he's sole publisher, how much of what was been going on DC over the years was Dan DiDio. Because now that he's sole publisher, everything that happens, and now that he's also chief creative officer, everything that pretty much 99% of publishing now, everyone's gonna look at him.
Right. It falls on him.
It falls on him. So that's gonna be very interesting to go forward. But again, I love Jim Lee. Not only is his art great, I think he has good ideas and stuff. So I'm very curious to see what that means. But let's continue, shall we? To answer the whole, part of the reason why we did that episode is because if the whole 5G thing wasn't gonna work out, we've heard rumblings behind the scenes and stuff like that it might be the end of DC Publishing as we know it. Right. So he addresses that here. He says, we've been with Warner Brothers for decades, and then elaborates, the actual strategy for DC is to put publishing at the center of what we do. It's the engine of all the movies, TV, cartoons, and everything else we do. And so it's my intent going forward as the publisher to lean into the collective years of my team. So right there, he's basically saying DC Publishing isn't going anywhere. But it's still kind of vague to me personally, where it's like, okay, You're not going anywhere, which is awesome because, again, to be clear, if I wasn't clear before, I do not want them. I love DC.
Right.
Batman and DC characters is actually what got me into comic books.
Yeah.
They're, you know, people make me choose sides and stuff all the time. And if I guess I like stories first and foremost, but DC is what got me into comic books because of Batman. So that would break my heart. But this is very interesting because it's like, so DC publishing is always going to be, but it doesn't answer the question, how is it going to be?
Exactly.
Because DC publishing could live anywhere. Like Warner, you know, he's saying they've been with Warner for decades. So the strategy is to, you know, keep that. But that doesn't, we don't know what the future is. You know what I mean? I'm sure to a certain extent, he doesn't even know what the future is. Now, obviously, he knows a lot more. But, you know, things can happen, especially in these big corporations. Something can happen today that would totally make this null and void, you know, from what he said at C2E2.
Yep.
So I'm very curious. But that's good, though. So that means DC, whether, you know, they ended up with Marvel or Universal or whatever, DC will always be a thing. Right. So, you know, which is what we thought. You know, it was very unlikely for that not to happen.
Well, we were no one ever said that DC was going to vanish off the face of the earth. That was never the discussion. It was, like you said, in what iteration? What was that going to look like? Or were they going to continue publishing in the way that we're used to, or was that going to shift? Was hard copy going to, you know, be reduced down to almost nothing, and we would go primarily digital along with a reduced number of books, which we've already seen a reduction in the number of titles over the last few years. So it was more about that, and I think that, you know, the biggest takeaway for me, just as a whole scope of his remarks at the panel, was what he didn't say. Also spoke a lot, and the ambiguity of it. It was a lot of corporate speak. It was very much him saying, answering the questions without answering the questions.
Right.
It was a lot of that. So the one thing that was definitive that he said was, and again, it wasn't even a direct answer, but he did, in his wording, it was definitive that he is the current acting publisher, solo acting publisher. And the other thing that I took away from it was the other part that you already read, where he specifically mentioned how the comics are the engine that makes the movies and the television and the animated stuff go.
Right.
Right. And so for him to comment on that almost right up front, was a little bit of a tell that, you know, what we've already been talking about, which is this going to become a thing where the comic books basically are commissioned to where, okay, you are literally going to be serving the film production, TV, animated side of things. So you're going to be writing stories, which would go right in line with what we've been hearing about them bringing in screenwriters to work on the comic books. And so that very much stood out to me.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm very curious again to see, you know. Let me just continue. Let me continue because we still got some more quotes, and then we'll talk about it all in summary. So after that, he directly addresses the Marvel acquiring DC publishing. So obviously that was
somebody asked him directly.
It doesn't say that here, so I don't know. It just says he seemingly but vaguely addresses rumors about Marvel acquiring DC publishing.
Oh, okay. So nobody asked him directly. I thought it was a question asked.
Right. I don't know. This article doesn't say one way or another, but he does say, quote, "To address some of the stuff that is out there, there's rumors, speculation that I wouldn't put any credence into. DC has been around for 85 years and will be around for another 85 years. I hope to be doing this panel in 85 years, end quote. So that's, you know, that's him basically debunking, I guess.
Not Marvel, at all for me.
You don't think so?
Not at all. I could list you a number of times, just off the top of my head, of instances where people that were at executive levels, they came out and they say that stuff in public, and within the week, a sale announcement is made. I mean, so for me, he doesn't actually say anything directly.
He says I wouldn't put any credence to it.
DC's not going anywhere.
Well, he does says I wouldn't put any credence. Like, you know, he's basically saying, no. He's not saying you know, if you really break it down, he technically is not saying it definitively, but he is alluding to like, it's probably not.
And again, I'm not saying like, oh no, that's definitely happening and he's lying. Not at all. I don't know that. I was speculating. What I'm saying is like what he's saying there would not, for me specifically, it would not make me go, oh well, that answers that. There's nothing like that going on. There's nothing to be. DC's just going to continue on exactly as we're used to. That does not in any way, like his comments didn't in any way make me go, oh, so, well, that brings some solidity to it.
So for you personally, I'm going to answer it after this, but I want to know your thoughts first. For you personally, did anything he said here, what I read so far, did that put any reassurance into you at all, on any level, about the future of DC continuing on its own or going somewhere else?
I mean, he didn't fuel anything one way or another. That was kind of what I'm saying, is it was a lot of corporate speak.
For sure.
It was a lot of ambiguity, which at this point, we're all used to spin, coming out of high level executives and politicians and all that kind of stuff. We're all used to that. You kind of have to read between the lines.
Yeah.
So it's like, I always look for okay, here's what you said, but what didn't you say? What is, because a lot of that is intentional. They actually talk about it before they go in front of the public, and they say, okay, just make sure not to say this.
For sure.
That sort of thing. That stuff goes on all the time. So even in his answer to that, he says, oh, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation. At least in the quotes that we've seen, he doesn't even specifically reference Marvel DC crossover or merger or anything like that, which, again, is a long shot. We acknowledge that. That's a long shot. If that happens, it would be shocking. But, we're just saying, hey, is that a possibility? Because there's some weird stuff going on.
There is some weird stuff, so yeah.
But, yeah, so he doesn't really, he just says, look, DC's been around a long time. We're going to be around a long time. I look forward to doing this in 85 years, right? Well, that doesn't tell me, okay, DC might exist, but is he going to exist with AT&T, right? We know DC's going to exist, but does that mean we're going to have 40 books? Being published regularly? Are we going to have 10? Are they going to be all digital? Are they going to be hard print? Are we going to see, he does address the idea of a reboot when it comes to 5G. He says that that's not what they're looking to do. So that's another thing that he did specifically.
There's one more quote. There's one final quote I was going to read. But before that, the previous quotes we've been talking about thus far, I'm half with you, because it half gives me a little bit of assurance. Half from, because obviously he's chief creative officer now,
right,
and he's sole publisher, right? So he's a high exec up there, right? But first and foremost, he was a creator. He's like one of the most famous artists in all of comic book history, right? So he is a creative and up there. So he does love these characters, care about these characters. So I do think I do think he feels a sense of responsibility to keep these characters the way we've liked them for so long. So I have hope in that too. So I feel like, again, it is very vague, but I do feel like they're trying their hardest to work things out. I think they're just in this weird state of flux because of all the stuff going behind the scenes, and even creatively with storylines, and they're just trying to make it work for X, Y, or Z reasons of, we don't know what's going behind the scenes. We just hear stuff. But this next quote, though, addresses the whole 5G, because he also spoke about the impending 5G initiative, which we've been covering here for a while now, because it's a big thing. We're like, why would you do this when Jeff Johns just fixed it in Doomsday Clock? That was the perfect reset. And now you're going right into a reboot, less than a year later or a year later.
It essentially inserted a whole bunch of uncertainty into the future of, and along with all these other things.
For sure. And you guys probably tell, I was getting the fanboy in me a little riled up. I'm like, what? Jeff Johns fixed everything. It took him years to do so. Leave it alone. But he mentions it right here. Lee says, it's hard to talk about things we haven't announced. Intention not to do a line-wide reboot. Lee goes on to clarify, our focus is talking to editorial team is to continue what we've done best. Character-driven stories, pairing right creators with right characters, and developing characters that are inclusive and diverse. So it seems like they're not going to be doing a reboot. If you were to take that, everything he said, he's flat out saying, no reboot. And I have heard, rumors, again, just rumors, of artists and writers behind the scenes panicking a little bit because they're being told to change things. They're like, you gotta, I know this was the plan, but we got to do this, this, and this. So much the artists are having to redraw pages to fix things. So I'm wondering if that's because when all speculation, I'm wondering if this is when the deal was there, he's like, 5G initiative, we're doing this. Now that Lee's sole publisher and AT&T is probably getting involved, they're like, no. So now they're being forced to try to fix and take back as much of it as they can with still making sense. Because again, we've said it several times, this train is in motion. So there is no way to bring it to a complete stop. So it almost sounds like they're doing damage control a little bit to be like, maybe no. And they're trying to spin it in a different way. So I'm very curious to see because again, we knew that this issue, the whole 5G initiative, was going to kick off in May, Free Comic Book Day. They haven't talked about it since. This was a few weeks ago. Even Lee didn't even comment on that. He purposely says, we haven't announced anything.
Right.
So I'm wondering if things got delayed, what's going to happen. Because if you have writers having to redo scripts and artists having to redo pages, which that's a lot of work, meaning they're probably going to have to get paid again for that pages, meaning more money's going into it. So, I'm very, very curious. But if that means we're not getting another reboot, yes.
Again, for me, it's all about the wording, right? And the wording is intentional. The high level execs, everything is parsed. So, like, note he says our intention is not to do a reboot, right? He doesn't say we're not doing a reboot. This is not a reboot. That's a definitive statement,
right?
He said our intention is not to do a reboot, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean you're not, like, we intend not to, therefore we are not, or the intention is not to, but it might be a little bit.
Right.
And that was just riddled throughout for me. It was just, there was a lot of covering bases in the way he worded everything.
I wonder if everything's
a lot of ambiguity.
It has to be vague on purpose, though, because I'm wondering,
100% it is.
Again, this train's in motion. They've been setting this up for the last year or two in books and teasing to it and stuff like that. So it's like, with the intention there, it's that way. So if they can't fully fix it, it's like, well, I never said that, it was 100% this way.
Yep.
So, that could be.
We'll see, man.
If you keep things vague, you can never say that, but you said. So maybe.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't do anything to, really pour gasoline on any of the concerns that we had previously, but it doesn't throw any water on the existing flames either for me.
Yeah.
It just is there's just there's too much ambiguity to it. It really could be interpreted several different ways. There's a couple things he says that it's like, okay, like he's definitively saying he's publisher here. And then he hints at the comics serving the film and production side more going forward. But past that, it's just so ambiguous, and it doesn't do anything to answer any of the major questions as far as what's going on with the creators and what happened with Dan DiDio and why, and what is 5G going to be then? You know what I mean?
Right,
it doesn't answer any of those questions. And until, they've got their crap together to the point where they can actually answer some of those questions, the speculation and the rumors will persist.
Yeah, it's very intriguing for me, because I feel like on one half I completely agree with you, but then like the other half of me is kind of like, I mean, I don't know if it's me hoping for things to be good, but again, I think it's the fact that the way he worded some stuff, and then the fact that he's a creative first and foremost. I would hope, because that's how he started, and he seems like a very down to earth guy, very cool. We've spoken to him at cons and stuff before. Very, very cool guy. So, I think he's trying his best to make things. I mean, say what you will, I think he is trying, because he may be the chief creative officer too, but he's got bosses and his bosses got bosses.
Exactly
like this
right.
chain goes all the way up, right? So I'm very curious to see even what he's probably being told to do, or what he can and cannot do, because everyone's got a boss, right? So I just want to know what's going to happen, because the last thing of this article said is that Newsarama actually reached out to DC to get a publication date, and they could not get one.
Right.
So, which is very weird, because, as we know, publishers and comic books, Marvel and DC especially, they solicit months and months out, because they have to, so retailers could buy the books and order them from their stores, because they got to make money. It's a business, right? So, and when you have a massive event, it's very weird if you have a year-wide event or this big new initiative to not be pushing it when initially we thought it was going to be starting in May.
Right.
So, it continues, it seems. We still don't have any definitive answer. I mean, we're getting some more revelations here and there, and I think, as San Diego Comic-Con rolls out, that's when I think we'll finally start getting definitive stuff, because if you're going to make an announcement in the comic book world, there is no better time to do it than San Diego Comic-Con.
Well, I mean, we did have a release date for
Generation
Zero
in May.
So if that doesn't happen, That's going to tell us something too.
Sure. You would think they would have to address that too.
They would.
Because
how do you not?
I was going to say.
You already announced it.
I was going to say, everyone would be like, wait, where is it? Because that's going to be a big pull. Because the reason why they do stuff like that is it's a free tease to get people into the store. So then they're hooked and then they buy the next issue because the next issue is not going to be free.
Right.
So I don't know. So 2 months we'll find out.
Yeah. If we see that go dark and we see the emphasis turn to Scott Snyder's death metal, then we'll know that something is up.
Which, again, I'm very curious to see how that's going to tie in because that stuff is, Scott Snyder was wearing a Wonder Woman T-shirt at C2E2, and with all this 5G initiative, they're talking about part of this new continuity was making Wonder Woman the first superhero within the DC universe. That's part of the continuity, and the fact that Wonder Woman is the main character in DC Metal and not Batman. This is all linked together somehow. Yeah. So,
and it falls right in line with his comments there at the end about diversity and inclusion as being their central focus.
So, I mean, again, we don't know much of that. That's all hearsay, but definitely going to talk about it once the books start dropping.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see. And, it's, I don't know how much we're ever going to find out because, again, the likelihood is that DC will stay with Warner Brothers in some iteration.
Yes.
That's the likelihood. There is possibilities for something else, especially because of the things that's going on with AT&T. But the likelihood is that they do stay with Warner Brothers. We just don't know in what way. But the other big thing is we don't know how much of this we'll ever find out. But how much is AT&T and the brass at AT&T playing in what's going on at DC? How much of that is coming down from the top, of them getting their marching orders and saying, this is what we expect, this is what needs to be done, and this is what we need to see by this point,
For sure. That's why, going to the point I was saying before, that's why I kind of have like that sympathy for Jim Lee because everyone's going to look to him because he's chief creative officer and publisher. And yeah, rightfully so to a big extent. But also, you got to see the other end of that. Like, he could have mandates from his bosses being like, you can do this and you can't do that.
I would even go further to say he definitely does.
Like if they're telling, if Warner Brothers AT&T is like, look, we need more diversity, do it. He has to do it. What is he going to do?
Especially if they're looking for those stories to directly inform future films.
For sure.
Right? Because that's the direction everything is going, especially with the women's empowerment movement and all that kind of stuff that we're seeing in film and TV. They want more of those stories.
Right.
So if they're trying to inform those films from the comic books and that's kind of a direction they're headed, all falls right in line with that.
So, yeah, it's this big kind of pull back and forth, I would imagine, between the DC publishing and then, the powers that be at AT&T and Warner.
Right.
So it's very, very intriguing stuff. And, as more stuff comes out, we're going to keep talking about it because this is oddly, it seems like this is, we're talking about it a lot, but it's making rumbles in the community.
It definitely is.
A lot.
That's why I said last week, this is one of the most fascinating things to happen in the comic industry in a very long time.
In a while, yeah.
Especially because of how much uncertainty and lack of information there actually is. But there's all this movement and these rumblings behind the scenes. And like we've talked about things that we know from people that we in the industry that we talk to and things that we're hearing back. It's created a very interesting scenario. And both of us are just kind of like, staring along with many of you in the audience. We're just kind of like looking at this like, well, how is this going to play out?
Well, the fact that Doomsday Clock ended a certain way and then, we got the announcement for Generation Zero on Free Comic Book Day in May, and then Dan DiDio, leaves DC just like all of a sudden out of nowhere, and then you have Jim Lee saying that, or DC not answering rather to the fact of publication dates for these new books when they were already pushing forward, and it was even referenced inside Doomsday Clock and several other books like Flash and so on and so forth, and now them going quiet on it. That's really odd.
Not to mention Scott Snyder seemingly just doing his own thing
with DC Metal,
right? So different from what Jeff Johns was doing and all this kind of stuff.
I'm wondering if they're reworking it for that to tie in somehow. To be like, look, Snyder, you've been one of our top-selling writers for the last several years now.
Right.
Fix it.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Right.
That would be interesting. We'll see what happens, man, but it is certainly curious.
So moving along, though, let's talk about Thor, Donny Cates' Thor. We got a big announcement for that at C2E2. It's been one of my favorite titles right now, if not my favorite title that Marvel's been putting out.
I would say definitively it's my favorite Marvel title right now.
Yeah. So we got a big announcement. Now, if you've been reading the book, spoilers for the first 3 issues. But if you've been reading the Thor title, you know Thor has been struggling lifting Mjolnir as of late. They've been mentioning it at least once an issue for the 3 issues that have been going on thus far. And now we find out at a C2E2 that in Thor issue 7, Mjolnir is going to be malfunctioning.
Right.
So, you know, this is actually...
It's like, what does that mean?
Well,
Mjolnir is malfunctioning like a computer?
Well, it's pretty crazy because if you've been following Thor and Jason Aaron's run for a while now, or any, you know, the Thor over the last several years, you know that he became unworthy. And we got unworthy Thor and stuff like that after Nick Fury whispered a secret into his ear and all that fun stuff. So I was kind of thinking, I'm like, wait, so now that he's got the power cosmic, and now that he's like, you know, King of Asgard and all that stuff, is he somehow becoming unworthy because of X, Y, or Z again? But I'm like, I guess that wouldn't make any sense because they already did unworthy Thor not too long ago. So now it's interesting that they're using the word malfunction.
Right.
Like
it lost Wi-Fi? Right. Like what? I don't understand what that means.
I mean, you know, I have no, maybe it needs
upgraded to 5G.
It needs to be charged. It needs that freaking that USB 3.0.
It's such a weird way to say it.
A lightning connection.
Yeah. Oh. We apologize.
But no, that's very, very interesting. So is the hammer losing its power? Like,
right.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of is maybe it somehow is being detached from the cosmic force that powers it.
Interesting, because that's now actually making my mind wander. What if that means for X, Y, or Z reasons, if it's Mjolnir is actually changing, what if now anyone could lift? Could you imagine?
That's what. Yeah.
If anyone,
like, what
if
it becomes? They almost make it sentient.
Right.
And it starts to evolve.
Because it does say issue 7, where this starts to happen.
Or its criteria for worthy begins to shift.
Maybe.
Right?
They could. Because it says here that issue 7 is going to kick a new story arc off. So this whole Mjolnir malfunctioning is a whole new story arc. So, but I guess that means issue 6 will conclude the Galactus Black Winter thing. Unless Black Winter is going to be a big overlapping thing. They could just kind of be throughout. But again, I'm wondering what that means. And considering that in issue 3, Thor broke Stormbreaker over Mjolnir,
right?
Which is crazy because in past continuity, it's been said before that Stormbreaker was even more powerful than Mjolnir.
Right, exactly. That's what I thought when I saw it. I was like, how in the world?
So it's very curious that they're like, yeah, no, it just shattered, you know, under Donny Cates' pen. So, you know, again,
I wonder if he'll make it to where it's almost like the Odin force that Thor now bears merged, and then being hit with the power cosmic, if that overwhelmed the Mjolnir and almost did like a short circuit.
I don't know. I'm very curious, but
maybe the merger of those two things is what makes it creates like almost like a sentient version of the hammer.
Sentient version of the hammer would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Donny Cates has some very interesting stories and ideas.
The hammer starts whispering.
Yeah. But for those watching this podcast and not listening, we're gonna show the cover art for it. Mjolnir looks actually really pretty crazy. Cool. It's like all white.
Yeah.
It's really it's Mjolnir and just
right. It
like
looks like a tesseract.
Essentially, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no
like
detail into it.
Hammer.
It just looks like it's made out of pure light.
Yeah.
So, you know, and we can see in the art too that he still has that he's got the power cosmic costume going on. So we know that he's gonna still be imbued by issue 7 with the power cosmic by the cover art. So
and we've got all this weird stuff going on with we actually just did an episode about Paradox.
Right.
And we had we showed this new character, Paradox, this new villain that's popping up in the Flash title, and there was a lot of similarities to freaking Thor, specifically this Thor.
Right, the cosmic Thor.
The cosmic Thor in that, where it might just be coincidence, but you showed me the picture. You're like, you got to see this new character, and I hadn't read it yet, and I looked at it. First thing I said was, "Oh, that reminds me of Thor."
I know, very, very curious, man. There's some. It's one of those things too, because a lot of this stuff does happen in comic books all the time.
Sure,
where it's like it is just
some of it's just tip of the hat, but some of it's coincidence. Yeah.
I feel like I'm just personally heightened right now, just because of all the stuff, all the changes going on. That I'm like, well, what does that mean? So I may be looking, or we both may be looking at the things too much. So I mean, time will tell.
We'll find out.
Time will definitely tell. But going back to DC, what female character, Tim, do I like more than anyone in the world of comic books?
Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn. So Harley Quinn, as we know, she was introduced as the girlfriend to the Joker, one of the first female henchmen for the Joker in the animated series, and later love interest, obviously. And she's been one of the biggest characters in comics for years now. I mean, she's just got her own solo movie recently, although it was Birds of Prey and Harley Quinn, and now it's Harley Quinn. DC decided to change it, or Warner rather decided to change it to Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey after its release. Either way, she's got her own movie, several solo series, but as of recent years, she's broken up with the Joker in the comic books. They are no longer getting along.
No longer an item.
Yeah, that is not her pudding anymore, right? So in the Batman comic book, Tom King just finished his run, and James Tynion is now writing the Batman book, which, if you guys remember, if you've been watching and listening to our podcast from the beginning, a few podcasts ago, I actually said I wasn't too impressed personally with the first issue of James Tynion's Batman run, right? But after reading the 2 to 3 issues after it, I purely realized, because it was all set up. Because I said it in the podcast. I said I was a little confused, and it was just like, what is happening? It was
like, where's this heading?
Where is this going, right? And it kind of just took me off guard, I guess. But now I love it. Now being in it, and I know what's happening. Fantastic. It's actually like it's bringing Batman back to the basics.
Right.
Where we're actually probably gonna do an episode on it on the main variant channel, because it's been really good. But he's doing a lot of beats where he shows that, because Batman has a lot of inner monologue, because he's the world's greatest detective. So in all the great Batman books, you see him talking to himself a lot.
Working things out.
Exactly. So Tynion is writing him like that, where you see him being like, saying the name of the villain and being like, Riddler, blah, 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 does this, kill this many people, this is the main trait, and kind of breaking him down, like breaking down the character in his head and how it works. So as if to like also tell the audience and the readers what this villain is, but also as a detective would, to be like, okay, let me run through this in my head. If this, and this, and this, and this, that means this is going to be this. And this is what, and that's the detective Batman, much like I think Matt Reeves is going to do in his live-action Batman film with Pattinson. Anyway, long story short, in Batman 89, we get a cameo appearance of what seems to be Joker's new girlfriend. That's right.
Which is so interesting.
So her name is Punchline. We see her in, I believe, 2 panels of that issue, and you
she doesn't appear a lot. It's a very brief cameo.
Right. I believe like 2 panels. She looks like a rag doll kind of. She's got like the rag doll, I don't know, makeup on her face, with
rosy cheeks,
a little circle on her nose, and we don't know, as of doing this podcast, we don't know much about her yet. Right. We just know that she's, seems to be a new love interest or girlfriend for the Joker, because in Hell Arisen issue 3, we got her first full appearance. So as of now, she's only made 2 appearances in comics. The first of which was 2 panels where you basically just see her mouth. And then the second was in Hell Arisen issue 3, we got her first full appearance where she's about to kill one of Lex Luthor's ladies, has a knife right up to her throat. But this is kind of crazy, because it seems like Tynion, because he's remember, he serves me correctly, he's also writing Hell Arisen. So he's doing a lot of stuff right now. He's got basically a big part of the Batman verse and Justice League kind of stuff going on.
He's playing a huge role over at DC. Right. Has been for a while.
Which is not shocking. He's one of Snyder's proteges, so it's kind of funny how, Snyder's had the Justice League. He set all that stuff up with Perpetua. Now he's doing DC Metal, and now Tynion's doing the Batman book in Hell Arisen. So those two are definitely, they're tag teaming it. But I'm very curious to see what kind of love triangle this is going to set up, because Harley Quinn, as of now, she hasn't got wind of this yet that we know of. So when she finds out,
the jealousy's going to kick in.
That Mr. J has got a new girl. That's going to be pretty interesting, because I would imagine ultimately, at some point, Harley Quinn would be brought back to the Joker side. It's been a few years now where they've been broken up. So, but I would imagine it's a matter of time, like anything in comic books. You have your run, you have your year or two, and then you kind of got to bring it back to the basics, to the legacy of it. So I'm wondering if this is the start of that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It definitely would seem logical to me that they would want to reintroduce Harley back to Joker at some point. Again, especially if they're trying to like revert a lot of things back to their original kind of source.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about the love triangle thing, because it could be really cheesy, but it could be good. It just is all a matter of how it's written, I guess.
For sure.
But the Punchline character, I think she looks really cool.
She does.
We don't know anything about her yet.
We don't. I mean,
so it's hard to really get too detailed into it, but she looks really cool.
We're about to get our origin soon in an upcoming issue, which obviously as soon as that happens, that's going to be an episode like same day. But we do know she is more of she's not as fun and like fun-loving and goofy as Harley Quinn. Just her demeanor.
Right.
She's more of a badass, like, I'm just going to kill you. This
Yeah.
is not about jokes and being, like, cutesy.
She seems more serial killer crazy.
Right. She's like the anti-Harley Quinn almost.
Right. Not the
sense.
Harley Quinn's, like, goofy, fun-loving psychopath. This is like more of like a serious,
Right.
like you don't, like you carry switchblades under your.
You know they're gonna fight ultimately. You there's no way James Tynion doesn't put them together eventually. So again, being the big Batman and Harley fan that I am, and Joker, just all these characters, and the fact that he's been doing a great job with setting up this new Batman arc, I'm very, very excited. Then we got the designer is actually a new character in there too, and we talk about it all the time. One of my favorite things to do is, like, if you get a big book like this, like a Batman or a Spider-Man book, I think the most clever way to introduce a new character or a villain is to make them seem like they were always there.
Always there, yeah.
And that's what he's doing with the designer. He's made it seem like this character has literally been there for years, much like Snyder did with the Court of Owls, which again is not shocking because James Tynion is Snyder's protege, so he's kind of like
teaching him the ropes.
Right. He's probably teaching. He's probably like, yo, that's what Yoda did. I'm his Padawan. So, but yeah, all this to say, I'm definitely curious to see where Punchline goes. And speculation for it has been crazy too. These books have been selling like crazy. The Batman book, like Batman issue 90 is already sold out. It's not even coming out. It's not even, before it's even like on shelves, it's sold out. It's already at a second printing, so people are like on it.
Very interesting, man.
So if you want to get these Batman books and not have to spend like $50-$40 on it, and you want to pay cover price $3.99, definitely get to your local comic book shop and pre-order it. Put it in your pull list.
I think that's what it's so interesting, man. When you put it all together, like everything that we're talking about and have been talking about for weeks now, just all the things that are going on in comics. As crazy as it is, and as much uncertainty as there is about the industry as a whole. There's some great books coming out. There's some great stories being written. There's some really interesting things that it's like, wow, that could lead to something really cool, which is why I think both of us have been like, why are we doing this reboot? Why are we shifting gears so dramatically?
For sure.
When there's so much, you spent so much time building up to get to this point where there's so much potential to go forward with it. But again, even with all the uncertainty and all the craziness that's going on, it's actually a really cool time in comics and with these stories and these characters, especially from the perspective of them going back and kind of reinventing some of the characters from their roots.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So you're getting they're bringing back the core of the character, but they're reinventing them in a more modern way at the same time. And it's making for some really interesting stories. And what Cates is doing with Thor, what Tynion's doing with Batman are two great examples of that.
For sure. It's also really, really interesting too to see that people, we talked about it before, that technically speaking, DC and Marvel, any of these big two, they have years, decades of back catalog to pull stories for TV shows, cartoons, movies, etc. Right? But funny enough, a lot of, the more popular characters that they've been pulling for, like Court of Owls, they made an appearance in Gotham. They've only been around for, less than 10 years, or beginning of the New 52. Even Godspeed. Right. Godspeed's only like, 3 years old. Yeah. He appeared in CW Flash, is currently appearing in CW Flash. So, the writers in the comic book world are still they have a lot of value to like the movies and film. They're still creating brand new characters that are almost instantly going over to TV and movies.
Exactly right.
So I don't think you want to cut that stream off.
No. And even beyond just the two bigs, we're seeing new comic book stories and characters that are being written under smaller publishers and in the indie circles that are also immediately translating over onto live action adaptations, i.e. Umbrella Academy, right? Or The Boys, stuff like that, right? So we're seeing it's still, even with all the craziness that's going on and a lot of the technological changes, the demographic changes that we're seeing where, people I prefer to read comics this way over this way, that what it was done in the past or whatever. Even with that, it is still very much the golden age of nerddom, man.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. If anything, things just evolve.
Right.
So we'll just, it's a new way of getting that thing we like.
Yep.
The biggest thing we say it all the time is like the music industry is kind of the thing I always look at where remember when we were getting into that Napster digital
Oh,
age, like everyone was
yeah.
freaking out and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah.
now almost no one owns a CD.
Yeah.
Everything is on your phone. You know, Spotify. You just listen
exactly
to almost
right.
all music on iTunes or Spotify. You know, unless you're a collector,
Yeah.
you don't have you do vinyl and CDs and stuff. You just have it on your phone, digital.
Yeah, there's just a time of disruption,
Mhm.
right? And the corporate, interests that are existing at the time that are making money a specific way, and they depend on those revenue streams. It goes through a time where there's disruption and upheaval, and that's normal, especially when technology is shifting. And then after a while, they finally adopt it,
Right,
and they
right,
finally
right.
go, okay, let's stop beating against the grain. We'll go with it.
For sure.
And they adopt it and they work it into their business models, and then we get a brand new thing, and it's fun. And it's, but the music thing is a great example. In the end, it usually winds up working better
Right.
and more efficiently for everyone than it did previously.
Yeah.
So it's very curious, and I agree. I think we're going to continue to see this stuff stay at high levels. It's just going to look different over time.
Yeah, I know there's been some people and stuff on the internet saying that the comic book industry is gonna die. Like it was like we only got like 2 more years left of the comic book industry. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Things just evolve. The comics are not gonna go away. So
No.
like, for anyone who's just getting into comics or worried about it,
Right.
I've been reading comic books for a long time. We've been working in business and stuff a long time. We know how the industry and stuff works, and it's going to evolve for sure. It's going to change for sure. But DC Comics, Marvel Comics, these characters are never going to go away.
Right.
There's always going to be a demand. There's just going to be new ways that we're reading
Yes.
and watching them. So I just want to kind of squash that because I feel like, people like to get all negative and stuff like that. It's like, no. It's going to change, yes.
Yeah,
It's not going away.
And not only that, it's like just even past the creative side, as long as there's money to be made with any of this stuff, we're going to see some iteration of it.
For
so
sure.
again, even if it evolves and it changes in the way that we get the content, we're still going to get the content with these characters. Like we talked about with, DC, if DC shuts down publishing, they're still going to license these things out as long as they own it, because they're still going to know there's money to be made here. Let's just find a way to do that.
For sure.
They're not just going to go stick it in a vault and let dust collect. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So yeah, these things aren't going anywhere. Comics are not going anywhere. These characters that we all know and love, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be around in some form for many, 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 many more years.
For sure. And in what way?
We don't know.
We're gonna find out.
For all we know, it's good. In the near, not too near distant future, anyway. It could very well be looking like we're absorbing these things through headsets that are virtual.
Dude, we both got the Quest, the Oculus Quest. That
Yeah.
thing is so trippy.
So crazy.
But actually, like speaking to that point, because you can watch Netflix and stuff on there. You were telling me because you got it. You got yours first. Mine was on back order, right?
Right.
So you got it for Christmas, and over Christmas break, you were telling me how like the Netflix, watching movies in it
Right.
is crazy. How it looks like you're actually in a theater. And I'm like, but Tim, like, it's gotta look small. You're like, no, just trust me. When you get it, just trust me. And you were right. It's like the weirdest mind
trippy.
F. But to that point, can you imagine that? It seems like a lot of things are going VR. VR is definitely going to be a big part of the future.
Yep.
So comics evolve in the sense where now, because you already got comics on TV, like 2-3 years ago, no, we couldn't read comics on TV.
Right.
Now this app's, I'm reading freaking Batman on my 65-inch TV in the living room, right?
Exactly right.
So, but VR is the next step. And imagine if they have the artists make it in such a way where it's literally like 360. The
Yes.
art is like you are thrown into Gotham
Oh, man,
City.
it'd be amazing.
Dude, like that's what I'm saying about Evolve. So like people may be sad, but that things are going to change, but we have some cool stuff
You
probably
bet.
ahead of us.
And as this technology continues to evolve, and it's doing it so rapidly, could you imagine even just having like a comic book reader on that headset,
Yeah.
right? Where you're able to pull up the comic book in front of you and just with your hand just go and just flip the
dude.
page with
That's
your hand.
Crazy.
And you would be able to zoom in, you could read it, and they could actually make the artwork, even if it's not 360, they could make the art three-dimensional
It could, yeah.
to where you're looking at it and it looks more lifelike, and you know what I mean? There's just so much that can be done. So, I am, regardless of all of the things that are happening, I'm definitely, just because of where technology is headed,
Yeah, we should
I'm
be excited
optimistic.
about innovation.
Yes, I'm very excited about the things that we're likely to get here in the next, especially the next decade.
And I think there's still gonna be a market for like, the original, like
Yeah.
the hard copy and stuff like that. Because I will always want that too. I'm one of those collectors. I like physical things, so I'm always gonna want that. It's just not gonna be as widespread. But
Right.
for the diehards, you'll have your little shops here and there where you'll just like vinyl. You'll
Yeah.
have your stores and stuff where you can get the records and stuff like that.
Exactly right.
But I think that's going to bring our thoughts to an end.
I think it's a perfect way to wrap things up on an optimistic note.
But with that said, guys, we'll see you next time when we talk about all things comics.